To discuss this development, I have a Middle East political analyst, Robert Inkalesh, who joins me via Zoom. Good to have you join us.
Thanks for having me.
So, looking at the developments in Israel, we know that President Herzog, along with the defense minister and three other cabinet ministers who are part of the Likud party, have all spoken against these particular judicial reforms. But the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu seems to be pushing on. Why do you think he is pushing on with these reforms, even with the resistance?
Well, Netanyahu is in a tough position, really, at the moment. He is fighting for his survival, perhaps not only as prime minister, but to keep himself perhaps out of jail because of his corruption trial as well by staying prime minister of the country. He's in a difficult situation because he has a coalition where members of the more further to the right of his right-wing Likud party, known as the Religious Zionism, that's the major bloc, the second most powerful party in his coalition, want these judicial reforms to go through. And they want really to change the nature of the way that Israel works away from the current model and more so towards a Judaized religious model. And that is much of what the coalition wants. And so they want for the Knesset to have power and for less oversight of the judiciary there. Now, on the other side, Netanyahu is facing all of these challenges, now including from inside his own Likud party. But if he delays the judicial reforms, then perhaps members of the Religious Zionism party could pull out of his coalition, which would collapse his government inevitably. So if these far-right coalition partners decide that they don't want to be part of this coalition anymore because Netanyahu is backed down, then this is the end of the current government. This is the end of Netanyahu as prime minister. Perhaps as well, this might be the very last time that we see Benjamin Netanyahu as the prime minister. So he's in a very difficult situation. And a lot of people fear that perhaps Netanyahu is looking for some external factor now, possibly a war, in order to divert the attention and unite the home front, as it's referred to as.
Mm. And from the picture you just painted, it would seem as though the prime minister has backed himself into a corner. Is there any exit for him?
I believe strategically it's very difficult unless he can do one of two things. Number one is that he can get the far-right coalition partners to agree to at least delay judicial reforms for now. That could perhaps cool down the situation in the immediate future. But looking at it, if he cannot get that, and his coalition partners are adamant that the reforms go through, then I think personally the only way forward perhaps would be to get involved in a conflict. Perhaps maybe they will do it with Lebanon or Gaza. I think more likely the Gaza Strip. And that might be a way to sort of quiet down the demonstrations and to unite the Israeli Jewish population, because of course the Palestinian population, which is 20% of Israel's citizens, is not part of these demonstrations for any large part. It's because of course it's discriminated against by the Israeli apartheid system there. So it will at least unite the Jewish segment of the Israeli citizenry.
And what does this mean for Israel in terms of how the international community would see this particular government and react to this particular situation?
I think it's very uneasy for the likes of the United States, because when we talk about the international community, primarily we were talking about the Western powers, and specifically the United States. I think it makes the United States very uneasy. I think the fact that a lot of Israelis who favor the liberal democracy banner and model for their state are fighting basically in the streets to preserve this. The United States has shown that they will back Netanyahu. They will back any kind of Israel, but they are uncomfortable with the instability at the moment. And I think personally, it's my analysis that the Religious Zionism party is not favored by the United States because it is not strategic. It is filled with ideologues. They're very dogmatic and emotional. And this clouds their judgment. And I think the United States and other Western countries are scared of their influence on Netanyahu's government. So at some point, I believe that probably they will step into a greater degree to try and save Netanyahu from this mess.
But how about Israel's neighbors? How do you think they're reading the situation?
It depends which neighbors, of course, that we're looking at. Saudi Arabia, which Israel has been eyeing normalization with. Obviously, it's gone further and further away in recent months away from that possibility. But at this stage, it wouldn't be looking at normalizing ties. The United Arab Emirates, Morocco, Bahrain, and others at Jordan and Egypt as well are at the moment looking on with a bit of shock, as of course they've normalized ties with Israel already. In the case of Syria, I don't believe there is much Syria can do to take back its territory, which is illegally occupied, the Golan Heights at the moment, but it's definitely happy with these developments. Hezbollah in the north and Hamas in the Gaza Strip are probably looking on with glee and smiling to see that the Israelis are weakening themselves. And of course, they're still threatening these groups and threatening to invade and bomb and kill the populations inside of Lebanon and Gaza whilst they're doing this. And so this perhaps makes them more confident that if there is a military confrontation, they could use the internal political divisions against the Israeli government at this time to inflict strategic defeats.
Thank you so much for talking to us. We'll continue to monitor developments there. Middle East political analyst Robert Inkalesh.